Hi everyone, welcome to OC Aviary for another video from our aviaries and bird rooms, where today we're going to be talking about biosecurity and hygiene in the bird room. With the current UK avian flu situation and of course the breeding season coming up, we need to make sure we're on top of hygiene. Of course, we always need to make sure we're on top of hygiene. We need to limit the spread of disease, we need to limit disease completely, and we need to make sure that everything that we do bring into the bird room, whether it be ourselves or whether it be perches, branches or anything else, is clean and is as disinfected as possible. So we're going to talk about my methods of cleaning down cages today and making sure your whole aviaries and bird rooms are biosecure. You need to make sure that you clean your cages on a regular basis. This is something that I do weekly, and remember, I've got a lot of birds, I've got quite a few flights as well, and you need to do this weekly. Make sure that the number of birds that you have are manageable for yourself. You need to make sure that you're able to maintain it all on a weekly sort of basis. Now, I use two different products when it comes to cleaning my cages. I'll first go round with some Clean and Clear Check Mite in a spray bottle, and I'll spray it round all the corners of the cages, anywhere that mite could linger, even where the cage fronts join the front of the actual cage, the wooden points, any cracks, crevices. Make sure you spray them with a mite spray. It's really important, and what will happen then is it'll kill the mite on impact and they'll drip down the side of the cage. That's when I'll go in with a spray bottle of F10 disinfectant. It's an avian safe disinfectant. I highly recommend it. I'm not sponsored by them, but it's really useful. I'll go around and spray the whole cage in that. Remember to take your birds out of the cage first, by the way. That'll then run any mite or any sort of disease, poo, anything the birds flick on the sides of the cage down onto your pull-out drawer. I'll then remove the pull-out drawer, scrape it down into a bag, and I'll spray that with disinfectant and a bit of Clean and Clear Check Mite as well. And then I'll go in with a bucket of hot water and a towel, and I'll just wipe down all sort of faces of the cage, the roof, the sides, the top, because birds do flick stuff on the top, believe it or not. The gravity isn't a thing to them, and it's generally quite nice and clean, and it doesn't take particularly long. Just make sure that you've got everything to hand, so it makes it as quick and as easy as possible for yourself. And then that works quite nicely. The cage is rather clean at that, and you're pretty much on top of disease, and that's something that I'll do on a weekly basis, and we'll talk about deep cleans later on, but it is something that works quite nicely. It's no good just cleaning your cage. You need to make sure that the cage furniture, like the drinkers and the perches, are also clean, because you can clean the cage as much as you want, but disease and mite can still linger on the cage furniture. So if you can afford to have two sets of drinkers, I highly recommend it. I have got two sets of drinkers almost. Not the same, and I do need to rotate them, but what it means, you can have 1 week a set of drinkers on while another set are being cleaned, and then you can just switch them out, and you've always got a set of nice clean drinkers. And you can use a baby bottle brush as well to get in the drinker and clean it out quite nicely, and it does a very good job. Or you can stick them in the dishwasher if you're allowed to, or have a bird room dishwasher if you can. It's a great idea. Now, that is really important. You're trying to stop disease spread from there, especially if you've got a load of birds all using the same water source. It can get contaminated very easily, so make sure you stay on top of that, and you're always refilling, giving fresh water. Now, the perches are something that a lot of people don't look to for mite. They usually look in the corners, but perches can harbour mite, and that's why I use diatomaceous earth from Multimite. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to Multimite for sponsoring this video. They've sent me a big bag of diatomaceous earth, which is going to last me a while. And what I do is I use the diatomaceous earth on the ends of the perches, and I'll put it in a tub like this, and I'll swirl the perches round in that, and I'll swirl the ends of the perches. That's where the mite are going to linger at night when your birds are roosting. The mite come out of there and they'll feed on your birds, get all the blood, and it's a problem, and you need to make sure you stay on top of it. So the diatomaceous earth is something I highly recommend, and I'll leave a link in the description to Multimite, and thank you very much for sponsoring this video, and I highly recommend you do get some. Now that should be your cage furniture also clean. Of course you need to do the same with your food pots. Give them a wipe down, make sure that disease can't be sort of lingering around on them, and the same goes for mine. And do clean down your cage fronts as well. Give them a wipe down with a towel, whether it be the hot water towel or another towel with a bit of disinfectant on it. Give them a wipe down and your cages should be sterile at that. And it does a very good job. It keeps my birds in great condition, and I hope it'll keep yours in great condition too.
Not only do you need to be concerned about disease spread from captive bird to captive bird, you also need to be very concerned about disease spread from wild bird to captive bird. And if you don't know already, I'm talking about avian influenza. Now, this is a massive problem in the UK at the moment. A lot of birds are being culled because of it. And if you live near wetland areas, conservation areas, anywhere where there are large numbers of migrating birds, especially sort of waterfowl that can carry this disease and it affects massively, there's a big problem. So you need to make sure you're on top of biosecurity. That's one of the big things that you need to take away from this video is the avian flu precautions that you need to take. Now, I recently did a write-up for the cage and aviary birds on this exact matter on how I control avian flu and making sure that I've got precautions in place so that I don't end up with any contamination. The first thing that I do is foot dips. Now, they're very expensive to buy, professional ones, so I just simply get a bowl, a normal washing up bowl, and I put that in front of the entrance and exits to the bird rooms and the flights. Now you need to make sure that you, of course, have got a government approved disinfectant in there. I'll leave a link in the description to the government approved disinfectant list. And then I put some filter floss in there so nothing can drink out of it or bathe in it. And then if you can have it under cover so it doesn't get diluted, it's a massive help. It just means that you don't have to change it as much. Now I religiously use this every single time I enter the bird room or exit the bird room. I use this foot dip. I wear wellies, as you can see, so that I don't end up with soggy feet. You don't want to end up with soggy feet. It's not very pleasant, especially when you've got a lot of stuff to do with your birds. And then use that every single time. And that means that you can't tread anything in realistically that will can't be contaminated with avian influenza or a different disease from birds, and just paddle this into your bird rooms or your flights. And you need to make sure you're on top of this. I highly recommend that you do this. I've got 3 bird rooms in use at the moment, or this set of flights, a bird room there and another bird room there with a new one being built. And I have 3 bowls and I use them every single day, all the time, and you need to make sure that you do this. You can disinfect your feet as much as you like, but if you don't have something to stop bird poo dropping through the roof of your flight, you're fighting a losing battle, and it's just a matter of time before something drops through and it gives your birds a disease that could perhaps be fatal, like avian influenza. Now, I have corrugated clear sheeting on the roof of my flights. This means that the sunlight can go through, the birds can sit in the sun and enjoy that, whilst also meaning that bird poo or rain or anything that could be contaminated can't drop through and bother them. I highly recommend that you do make sure that you've got this on your flights. It doesn't have to be corrugated, it doesn't have to be clear, but you could use a tarpaulin, whether it be just for this winter whilst cases are high, or anything like that. But please make sure that you take those necessary precautions so you don't end up losing birds and causing a lot more problems for yourself with losing birds, having to have birds culled or anything like that. I hope this information is useful for you. You don't want to be keeping birds in an area where there's low ventilation. It's not good for them. It's going to cause them respiratory problems. They're going to end up with air sac mite or ornithosis or something that isn't good. You need to make sure that they've got this adequate airflow, and it's only going to be beneficial for them. Now, there is a difference between having adequate airflow and having drafts. You need to make sure that drafts can't bother your birds at least 24/7 and they can get out of the drafts. So the first things that I do is I make sure I've got vents in the bird room. I have an extractor fan in one bird room that is slightly less ventilated. In this particular bird room, we have a vent over in the far corner. We have another one behind the camera, and I also do have a mesh door which I have on most of the time. The birds can get out of the draft, and it just means that you've got really good ventilation through. In outdoor flights, you don't really need to worry about this. There's always going to be plenty of airflow in there, and native birds are rather hardy, especially when it comes to cold temperatures, so don't be too worried. And even some canaries are absolutely fine. And it is really important that you make sure that they're not going to suffer from poor airflow. It does make an effect, and you will find that especially birds like Siberian bullfinches, if you've got poor airflow, they're going to end up with the gapes, which we use for a term which is either air sac mite, ornithosis, or there is one other disease that it comes out as almost all three. Same symptoms, it can be one of three, it's sort of potluck. And that is a real problem. Make sure you've got ventilation. To stay on top of hygiene, to make sure that bird rooms don't smell and they're not contaminated with disease, of course, you need to make sure that you've also got some adequate flooring that is really easy to clean. Now, I have vinyl flooring in this bird room. It's just really easy to roll down, it's stuck down, and it means that I can come in and brush it. I brush it every day, clean up any seed, anything that is thrown on the floor by the birds, because they do make a mess. Especially if you've got green finches, it's just everywhere all the time. And then I'll come in with disinfectant or bleachy water or soapy water, and I'll come down and scrub it once a week really well with a hard brush, and it cleans it up really nicely. It makes it shine, and it is really useful. Now, I do have a bird room with a wooden floor that isn't going to be standing much longer, and that one is a real problem for cleaning. And I do regret not putting a vinyl floor in there. So if you can, make sure you've got some really easy to clean up floor so you don't end up with any problems. So finally, you need to make sure that you're storing seed in places where it can't be contaminated either. You don't want vermin getting into your seed, leaving droppings, whether that be mice, rats, slugs or anything like that. They can carry disease, they will carry disease, and they will get it into your birds if you're not careful. So I make sure my birds are safe, and I like to store my feed. These feed bins, really useful pieces of equipment. It's really heavy because it's got about 20 kilos of seed in it, and I highly recommend that you do get some. They're completely sealed off, you've got a lid on it which is generally a good tight fit, and you can even get some that have got a sealable lid which has like a whole clip around it. Really useful pieces of kit to store your seed in, keep it dry, to keep it out of the way of vermin, and it also does look a lot nicer than just bags everywhere. So that does bring us to the end of this week's video, so I hope you have enjoyed it and you've picked up some useful tips to keep your birds safe and secure from disease and any problems like that. This works really well for me, by the way. I just want to let you know that I rarely end up with an ill bird by doing this. We do end up with the odd one that just isn't quite 100% right, and you need to make sure, of course, you treat your birds for other problems that they may come up with, especially like green finches, rather prone to coccidiosis. So do make sure you treat them like that, but it always works really quite nicely for me. Touch wood, it's going to continue to do as well, and I hope that it does for you as well. Now, if you have enjoyed today's video and you'd like to see more from OC Aviary, then make sure to subscribe down below so you don't miss any more future content. And if you have enjoyed it today as well, smash a like on it. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.